Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a myth soaked in wine, wrapped in ivy, and somehow still about deep-seated parental trauma. You'll walk through lands of tambourines and leopard pelts, but don't expect anything to make perfect sense. This is Dionysus we're talking about. You'll meet a god born twice, a mortal mother who got vaporized for asking too many questions, and a father who literally sewed a baby into his own thigh, because parenting books weren't really a thing yet. You'll feel the sun over Thebes, the dust clinging to your feet, the distant sound of laughter that feels just a little too loud, a little too close to a scream. And you'll watch the god of wine, madness, and awkward social energy grow up into someone nobody quite understands, but who always brings the most unforgettable gift bags. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling awake enough, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin as a spark, not in a nursery, but in the belly of a mortal woman who dared to love a god. Her name is Semele. She's clever, bold, and, most importantly, very pregnant. Also, very mortal. She catches the eye of Zeus, who, to nobody's surprise, promptly disguises himself, seduces her, and gets her pregnant. What follows is the kind of story that would make even your nosiest aunt drop her wine glass. Hera, queen of the gods, long-suffering goddess of marriage, and absolute menace when it comes to revenge, hears about the affair. She doesn't just fume in Olympus, she goes undercover. Disguised as an old woman, she befriends Semele, gently suggesting, "You sure that's Zeus?" Sounds suspiciously like Gary from the fish market. Semele, whose pregnancy glow is probably visible from space, decides to demand proof. She asks Zeus to appear to her in his true form. This, it turns out, is the fastest way to vaporize a human being. Zeus, bound by his divine promise, reveals himself. Semele instantly incinerates, because the glory of a god is not rated PG-13. In the ashes and ozone, however, Zeus snatches the unborn child, and, in what can only be described as divine improvisation, sews the baby into his own thigh. Historians still argue whether this thigh sewing was symbolic, metaphysical, or just Greek for "don't ask questions." But what we know is, it worked. Months later, or some dimension of time we can't really measure, Dionysus is born again. He is, quite literally, a twice-born god, first from a womb, then from a thigh. It's hard to get more mythologically complicated than that unless you're Oedipus, and that's a story for another sleepless night. Now you, tiny Dionysus, are alive, but not exactly safe. Hera's still around, and she has the kind of memory that keeps grudges in neat little jars, alphabetized and labeled by bloodline. Zeus, realizing that hiding a child from Hera isn't exactly his strong suit, does what any panicked father would do. He calls in backup. He hands you off to Hermes, the divine mailman and certified chaos goblin, who promptly smuggles you away. Some versions say you're taken to a cave, others to the care of mountain nymphs. One version even suggests you were raised disguised as a girl, which, given your later aesthetic choices, might not have been that confusing for you. You grow up in secret, surrounded by lush vines, wild music, and creatures with hooves. The nymphs give you milk and honey. The satyrs teach you how to dance. And somewhere between the rhythm and the silence, you begin to understand who you are. You are not a god of war or logic. You are a god of the in-between, of the liminal. The one who exists between madness and joy, love and loss, divine and human. Mainstream scholars agree Dionysus represents a kind of necessary chaos, the thing humans need when everything gets a bit too tidy. And frankly, after your birth story, tidy is not an adjective you're aiming for. You learn to create wine. You invent it, some say, which honestly feels like enough of a contribution to retire early. You carry vines in your hands like torches. You laugh too hard, dance too late, and sing songs that confuse birds and inspire mortals to make questionable decisions. You are, in every sense, a lot. But you're not yet accepted. The Olympians look at you and blink. You're Zeus's son, technically. But your mom was mortal. You weren't born in Olympus. You've got this entourage of tambourine-banging strangers and wild animals, and you're kind of the first deity who doesn't smell like authority but like spilled mead and regretful mornings. So you wander. The world opens up, and you step into it with bare feet and a crown of ivy. You wear animal skins. You paint your lips. You throw parties and vanish before the bread is done rising. People adore you, or fear you, or both. But no one forgets you. You start to attract a following, mostly outsiders, women, the marginalized, those tired of being told what's proper. They join your dances on hillsides, beat drums in time with their own heartbeat. Your rites are strange to the city folk, terrifying to the rule followers. But to those who live on the edge of things, you are joy. You are freedom. You are the right to feel something other than fear. And through it all, Hera still watches, still waits. But for now, you dance. You move like the vines you carry, twisting, growing, reaching, not toward the sun, but toward something softer, something darker, something that feels like velvet and storm clouds, and the exact moment the wine hits your tongue. You are Dionysus, and your story is only beginning. You keep walking, barefoot through lands that only kind of remember you exist. The air smells like roasted olives and damp stone. The trees lean in like gossiping ants, and the breeze carries laughter. Sometimes yours, sometimes someone else's. You are the god of wine, which is to say, you are also the god of not being taken seriously until it's far too late. Your early years of wandering are filled with awkward encounters. You knock on doors, people slam them. You host revelries in olive groves and get run out of town the next morning. You bring joy, but joy, apparently, is something people are deeply suspicious of, especially when it arrives with satyrs playing flutes and women wearing ivy crowns instead of proper sandals. One of your first most charming misadventures happens on the coast. A group of Tyrrhenian pirates spots you lounging alone on a beach, barefoot, radiant, completely unarmed. And they think, jackpot. You're just the right amount of fancy to be valuable and just the right amount of dazed to be easily kidnapped. They drag you aboard their ship, completely unaware they've just abducted a god. You say nothing, which is honestly a power move. You let them hoist the sails, laugh about ransom, and plan who's going to get which share of your non-existent dowry. And then, things get weird. The ropes tying you up start falling off, not like snapping, like they forget how knots work. The mast sprouts ivy. Grapevines coil down the sails like party streamers no one remembers hanging. The ship begins to smell like an amphora exploded during a Greek wedding. Then the music starts, flutes from nowhere, tambourines from thin air. One sailor panics. He jumps overboard. The rest, watching you transform from guy in a weird robe to divine entity glowing with suppressed laughter, also leap, screaming. But instead of drowning, they begin to shimmer. Their legs fuse, their arms flatten. Their screams turn to squeaks. You watch them become dolphins, panicked, squeaky, probably still confused, and swim away. You smile, not cruelly, just like someone who tried being nice and got tired of asking. That ship, what's left of it, drifts empty. You step ashore somewhere new. This is your pattern now. You arrive. You're rejected. You prove yourself, usually by upending local reality. And then you leave before anyone can say sorry. Historians still argue whether this phase of your myth, this wandering, half-exiled god routine, reflects an older, non-Olympian origin. Some say you were a Thracian deity absorbed into the Greek pantheon too late to get proper seeding. Others claim your myth spread from the east, hinting at rituals born far from Mount Olympus. Either way, you don't fit neatly into the roster. You are the outsider god, the latecomer, the patron of those who weren't on the guest list but showed up anyway, and somehow made the night unforgettable. Eventually, you begin to gain followers. They're not soldiers or priests. They're farmers, dancers, beggars, and bored aristocrats looking for something, anything more than state-sanctioned hymns. Your presence grows. Your name travels by rumor. People whisper about the stranger who makes the vineyards bloom in one night. The man with the golden eyes who dances until the earth itself hums. The god who makes you feel like you matter, even if no one else thinks you do. You also start collecting companions. A motley group of satyrs, maenads, and the occasional confused traveler who takes a sip of something purple and wakes up speaking in riddles. One of your favorites is a mortal named Ampelos, a boy with charm, a recklessness to match yours, and a tendency to climb things that do not want to be climbed. He tries riding a wild bull. It goes as well as expected. He dies. You're devastated. But this is Greek mythology, which means death is never just death, it's transformation. You take his body, cradle it like something sacred, and from his blood, you coax the first grapevine. His death gives birth to wine. He becomes the plant that becomes the drink, that becomes the ritual, that becomes the memory. It's beautiful. And also a bit much. But that's kind of your whole vibe. You wander further. Asia Minor, Phrygia, India, if you believe some versions, which you do. Because the idea of you leading a drunken expedition across the subcontinent with elephants draped in silks is too fabulous not to believe. Along the way, you're tutored by strange figures, Sileni, old satyrs with more wine than wisdom, who tell you half-truths and riddles and help you shape your powers into something almost like control. Almost. One of them, Silenus, becomes your permanent companion. He's ancient, bald, round-bellied, and perpetually drunk. But sometimes when he speaks, his words make too much sense. He's said to know everything, including, inconveniently, the future. But he only speaks clearly when caught or cornered. Most of the time, he's just riding a donkey backward and laughing at clouds. You, on the other hand, are starting to be taken seriously. Sort of. City-states are debating whether to build you temples. Philosophers are trying to figure out if your parties count as religious experiences. One guy insists you're just a metaphor for fermentation. He doesn't get invited again. But for now, you walk. You walk in sandals that never quite get dusty. You walk through cities that love you too late, and hillsides that sing your name before you arrive. You walk with a bottle in one hand and a riddle in the other. And wherever you go, things change. Not always in ways people want, but definitely in ways they remember. Because that's what you are. You're not the god of comfort, or order, or polite conversation. You are the god of awkward entrances and unforgettable exits, of wild music, of boundary breaking. You are joy and madness, intertwined like vines on a ruined trellis. And your next stop? It's going to be even stranger than this. You arrive in Thebes. It's supposed to be a homecoming, but nobody's put out the good wine. Or any wine, really. The city where your mortal mother, Semele, once lived has forgotten you. Or worse, remembered you as a rumor. They know your name. They just don't believe it means anything. You stride through the gates not as a warlord or a noble. No army, no banners. Just you, some satyrs, a few maenads already a bit too excited, and your usual fog of faint flute music and suspiciously spontaneous grapevines. You could call ahead. You could announce yourself. But that's not your style. You go quiet, subtle, like a storm that starts with a single drop. But the king of Thebes, Pentheus, is not a fan. Not of you, your rituals, your mystery, or your outfit. Let's just say the man has strong opinions about animal print and eyeliner. He's stern, young, polished in that too shiny, too breakable way. He likes rules. He likes things that make sense. And above all, he likes to be the most powerful presence in the room. So when rumors start swirling about a stranger in the hills leading women into ecstatic frenzies, chanting, dancing, tearing through the forests like nature has a new conductor, Pentheus says, absolutely not. He calls you a fraud, a charlatan, a threat to order. He threatens to arrest anyone who joins your rites, which, frankly, is hilarious. Because at that exact moment, half the noblewomen of Thebes are already out in the woods wearing ivy crowns and composing poetry, with their eyes rolled back in divine bliss. Pentheus doubles down. He orders your capture. You let him. It's cute, really. He thinks he's won. You arrive at his court, wrapped in your soft robes, smiling just enough to unnerve every guard in the room. You let yourself be chained, again, a theme. And then you proceed to have a very casual conversation about what it means to worship. Pentheus grows more agitated by the second. He accuses you of magic, trickery, hypnosis. You tilt your head and ask if he's ever danced in moonlight. You suggest he try on a dress. For research. He doesn't take it well. Historians still debate whether this part of your myth is satire, tragedy, or a warning about the dangers of repressed curiosity. But what happens next is undeniably Dionysian. You break free, of course. The palace trembles. Vines crack through the floor. Your followers chant your name, and Pentheus, poor Pentheus, can't stop watching you. He wants to understand. So you offer him a disguise. You want to see what the women are doing? You say. You'll need a costume, a woman's cloak, a long wig, walk their path, see their truth. And he agrees. You guide him to the mountains, dressed in robes not his own, vision clouded by longing and hubris and the faint scent of wild thyme. He creeps through the trees, peering at the maenads from a distance. But they see him, not as their king, not even as a man, but as a wild beast. Your spell fractures. Or maybe it completes. Either way, the maenads fall upon him. They rip him apart with ecstatic strength, thinking him a lion. His mother, Agave, leads the charge. She doesn't realize who it is until it's too late. She cradles his head in her hands like a trophy, laughing, until the madness fades and the truth sinks in like winter into stone. You don't laugh. Not really. You tried to warn him. You gave him every chance. But he chose rigidity, chose rules, chose not to believe in the divine that wears a dress and laughs too loudly. You walk away from Thebes, not triumphant, not mournful, just real. Because this is the awkward line you always walk, between celebration and destruction, joy and collapse, the party, and the mess that comes after. You're not just the god of wine. You're the god of what wine reveals. And speaking of parties, the feasts in your honor are getting wilder. The Dionysia, they're called. Public festivals in your name, blending theater and reverence, chorus and chaos. People act out stories in masks and cloaks, their lines half scripted, half screamed. They tell tales of you, through you, around you, because talking about Dionysus is somehow easier than talking to you directly. You become the god of theater, of masks, of pretending to be someone else until the pretending feels more real than the truth underneath. It fits. You've always been a performance, a myth wearing sandals, a contradiction in motion. You preside over the tragic and the comic, both, which is to say, you understand the human soul better than anyone else on Olympus. And still, you haven't been offered a seat there. You're divine, respected, maybe even feared, but you remain on the edge, in the wings, watching, laughing, pouring another cup for someone who needs it. Because while the other gods deal in laws and lightning and logic, you deal in relief, in release, in catharsis. You don't want to be worshipped. You want to be felt. And you are. In every festival, every poem, every breathless, chaotic night that ends in laughter and regret, and maybe just a little self-awareness. You are the god of the good time that reveals the bad mood behind it, and of the terrible night that somehow ends in unexpected peace. You're a contradiction, but at least you never pretend otherwise. You keep moving. This time, you're going downward, not metaphorically. You are quite literally descending into the underworld, and your sandals, though stylish, are not made for this terrain. The rocks hum under your feet. The air gets heavier. It smells like stone and secrets, and the silence isn't empty. It's crowded with things that no longer speak. Why are you here? Because you left something behind. Her, Semele, your mother. Remember her? Mortal, burned to ash by the sight of Zeus's true form. Lover of gods, giver of life to you. Twice, technically. And now, just another soul pacing the halls of Hades. Her name barely more than a whisper. You've brought a plan, and a cup, and naturally a flair for dramatic entrances. You don't kick the gates in. That's not your way. You charm your way past Cerberus. Maybe you bring him a treat. Maybe you scratch that one ear that makes his back leg twitch. Whatever you do, the three heads let you through without a growl. Most mortals have to cross the river Styx on Charon's boat, clutching a coin and a prayer. You walk. The river parts for you like wine in a cracked goblet. You reach Persephone first. She's beautiful in a way that feels dangerous. Her smile is half spring, half buried frost. You bow respectfully. She offers you a seat, then leans forward and says, "Why are you really here?" And you tell her, you want your mother back. Hades raises an eyebrow. He doesn't get many visitors who ask for souls to leave. Most come to bargain, weep, or pretend they didn't know the rules. But you aren't here to break the system, just to negotiate with it. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth was added later. Some suggest it reflects an Eastern motif of death and rebirth. Others say it's the Greeks trying to retrofit your myth with a softer edge. But what's clear is that this trip changes you. You're not like Orpheus, who looked back and lost everything. You know not to look. You keep your eyes forward. You find Semele. She looks up, startled. You smile, soft and unsure, like a child offering a flower. And you say, "Come with me." And she does. You bring her out. You lead her up. You cradle her soul in your divine hands and guide it back to the light. But you don't just bring her to Earth. You bring her to Olympus. You elevate her. Semele, mortal no longer, becomes Thyone, a goddess in her own right. She takes her place among the divine, not because of what she did, but because of who she loved, and maybe because of who you became. It's a moment of soft justice, a rare one. And yet, you still aren't seated at the great table yourself. Not officially. Olympus doesn't always know what to do with you. You're not noble like Athena. You're not shining like Apollo. You're not charmingly messy like Hermes or even vaguely horrifying like Poseidon. You're complicated, and the gods prefer their power simple. But mortals? Mortals are starting to understand you. They see your festivals as more than just an excuse to dance badly and avoid taxes. They sense the grief behind your joy. The way your laughter sometimes sounds like it's echoing down a long, empty corridor. You become the god of thresholds, of the door between this world and the next. The god you call on when things are shifting, when certainty slips away and all that's left is instinct and breath and whatever you can carry in your arms. People start to pray to you not just for wine, but for release. For the kind of madness that makes suffering bearable, for the kind of forgetfulness that comes after too much remembering. You aren't a healer, you're more of a balm, and you're not above a little chaos. Some say you ride in a chariot pulled by panthers, others claim it's donkeys, which feels like a pretty serious downgrade unless you've ever actually met a donkey. You travel with your entourage, still loud, still draped in animal skins and mystery. But now there's a rhythm to your steps, a direction, a purpose. You are no longer just the god who throws strange parties. You're the god who understands why people need them, not for fun, for survival. You pass through cities again. This time they're ready for you. Kind of. They've built theaters in your name. Hollow stone bowls where people gather to watch tragedy unfold like petals under pressure. The actors wear masks. They become kings, queens, fools. Their words slice through the air, echo across the marble, and land somewhere deep in the gut of every listener. It's catharsis. It's ritual. It's your temple. Even in drama, you are always there, just off stage. The god of what lies beneath the script. And when the plays end, and the crowd disperses, and the sun begins to slide behind the Acropolis, you are still there. In the silence. In the aftermath. In the feeling no one can quite name. Because you're not the god of the party. You're the god of what happens after. The god of memory blurred by wine. Of joy that ends in tears. Of grief that accidentally makes you laugh. The god who knows that life is too complicated for clean emotions, and far too short to skip dessert. You bring Semele home. You sip your wine slowly, and you watch, quietly, as the world starts to change around you. The wind carries music before you arrive. It always does now. You don't need messengers. You don't need announcements. Wherever your feet touch the ground, the air trembles just a little, and someone, somewhere, starts humming a tune they don't quite remember learning. Tonight, the hills are alive. Yes, literally, with the sound of ritual. But this isn't Olympus. It isn't some polished marble temple where incense burns in neat lines and prayers sound like formal requests. This is a forest clearing. A hidden hillside, a forgotten grove miles from the nearest city wall. Here, things are different. The trees are the only columns. The moon is the only lamp. And the people who follow you? They've left their shoes and their sense of moderation somewhere far behind. These are your rites. the Dionysian mysteries. They're not well understood, not even by the people participating, especially not by historians. Ancient writers get nervous when they try to explain what happens in your name out here. They shift in their seats, clear their throats, use a lot of vague language. Ecstatic worship, liberatory frenzy, collective madness. All technically accurate, none particularly helpful. What we know is this: your followers gather in secret, far from the gaze of the police. Mostly women, often those with too little power in daylight. They wear fawn skins, ivy wreaths, and masks, goat masks mostly. They sing, they dance, they drink, yes, but not just for fun. Not the clumsy, sloshing kind of drinking. This is different. This is about forgetting boundaries, about becoming something more, or less, or neither. They become maenads, raven ones. But the word doesn't capture the beauty of it, or the danger, because it's not just dance, it's not just wine. Sometimes it ends in blood. They say your maenads tear animals apart with their bare hands, that they lose themselves so completely they can pull limbs from sockets while laughing, only to collapse in exhaustion and wake up weeping. They say you fill them with divine madness, that you inhabit them, that in those moments, they are you. Historians still argue whether these rituals were symbolic, spiritual, or literal, whether people actually hunted rabbits with their teeth, or whether it was a metaphor for confronting the animal inside, whether it was therapy or performance or both. But the thing is, you don't clarify. You let them wonder. Because for you, ritual isn't about answers. It's about transformation. You don't care if the goat mask makes sense. You care if it makes them feel. And oh, they feel. They wail. They chant. They sway like tall grass in the grip of a wind they've chosen not to resist. They speak in voices not their own. They remember things they never lived. They forget things they never wanted to carry. And when dawn comes and the fire turns to ash, they return home barefoot, bewildered, and somehow healed. They can't explain it, and that's fine. You've never been interested in explanations. Still, your rights bother people. City officials complain about noise. Husbands complain about wives wandering. Philosophers complain about the breakdown of reason. But it's not about volume or gender or logic. It's about control. Your rights make people hard to predict, and unpredictable people make systems nervous. That's always been your effect. You don't destroy laws. You make them irrelevant, for just long enough that people remember they were invented in the first place. And then there's the music. It's never polished, never orderly. It's drums that forget their own tempo, flutes that squeak in joy, clapping that turns into stomping and then into silence, just long enough for someone to scream and start it all again. It's not meant for audiences. It's not meant to be understood. It's meant to be felt. Your rights are the birthplace of theater, but they're not performances. They're confessions, untranslated, unsanitized, and very, very loud. And what about the men? They come too. Some in secret, some in drag, some pretending they're just here to observe, and definitely not participate. You don't judge. You welcome everyone who's willing to leave their name behind and step into the blur. The rituals bend time. Nights last days. Hours stretch. A heartbeat becomes an eternity. You sip wine that tastes like childhood. You shout until your throat bleeds. You sleep like someone who's been wrung dry, then reborn. And through it all, you're there. Sometimes in the trees, sometimes in the fire, sometimes in a stranger's laughter that's a little too loud, a little too knowing. You don't lead the ritual. You are the ritual. you never show up the same way twice. One time, you appear as a beautiful youth with vines in your hair. The next, an old man with bark for skin. Once, you're a bull, your horns catching the moonlight like silver knives. Once, you're a lion, mouth red with berries, or something else. You don't explain. They don't ask. They just believe. And when it's over, the Maenads return to their lives. They fetch water. They mend cloaks. They kiss sleeping children on foreheads and pretend they don't hear the drumbeat still echoing in their chest. The city never quite trusts them again. And the Maenads never quite need it to. Because once you've danced with your god, the marketplace feels very small. You keep your rights alive by staying slightly out of focus, slightly out of reach. A whisper in the vineyard, a vine growing overnight in a public square. A feeling that bubbles up on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon and makes someone laugh or cry or dance without knowing why. You are the god of forgetting, but also of remembering what the world wants you to forget. That you are not your name, not your debt, not your duty. You are the body beneath all of that. You are breath and bone and joy and howl. And in those hills where the goats wear masks and the moon tastes like honey on your lips, you are free. Sometimes, a god falls in love with a vineyard, or maybe it's a metaphor. Either way, this one begins with a man named Pentheus. No, not that Pentheus. We've covered him. This one is named Icarius, a kindly soul in Attica who offers you his hospitality, and more importantly, his wine press. You reward him. Of course you do. You gift him the knowledge of winemaking, the real kind. Not just fermented grape juice, but the good stuff. Smooth, bold, complex. He shares it with his neighbors, and they promptly get absolutely obliterated because no one warned them that this drink doesn't just refresh, it transforms. They panic, assume they've been poisoned, beat Icarius to death, and bury him in a shallow grave under a fig tree. When his daughter Aragone finds his body, she hangs herself from that very tree. Her dog howls for days. Even the olives go quiet. You mourn. Quietly. No vines erupt from the soil this time. No ecstatic frenzy. Just a stillness, heavy and cold. Then, in your own Dionysian way, you curse Athens. Madness spreads. Young girls start wandering into the woods and doing what Aragone did. The fig trees stop fruiting. The wine goes sour. Eventually, the Athenians figure it out. They build you a shrine. They honor Icarius. They make sure no one forgets how dangerous generosity can be when it's misunderstood. That's always the thing with you. You try to give joy. Sometimes they find terror in it. You begin to pull away from small towns and fig trees. You take to the cities, the big ones, with amphitheaters and philosophers who pretend they don't sneak off to your festivals. And this is where you meet another man with strong opinions and an even stronger jawline. Pentheus 2.0? No. His name is Pentheus adjacent in spirit, but this one is different. His name is Pentheus's spiritual cousin, a king, a noble, someone trying very hard to hold a city together with logic, laws, and politely distributed bread. You don't hate these men. You confuse them. You offer chaos in a world built on structure. They don't know what to do with that. And sometimes they try to resist so hard that they snap. That brings us to your most famously awkward breakup. King Lycurgus of Thrace. Now, Lycurgus really doesn't like you. Capital H hates you, declares wine illegal, kicks your worshippers out of town, chains up your Maenads, tries to ban revelry. Banning revelry, by the way, is like trying to outlaw sneezing. You don't retaliate immediately. No vines through the palace. No panthers at his door. Instead, you let him unravel. He starts seeing things. Terrible things. His wife weeping blood. The earth cracking. Grapes growing from the eyes of statues. He takes an axe to his own family, thinking they're vines. Or enemies. Or maybe just symbols. When it's over, you don't punish him. Nature does. The land goes barren. The gods withdraw their favor. Eventually, Lycurgus flees, blind and broken, his legacy reduced to warnings carved into temple walls. Do not cross the wine god. Or do, just don't complain afterward. Historians still debate what these stories mean. Are they morality tales? Ritual metaphors? Cautionary allegories about ignoring seasonal change? Maybe. Or maybe they're just what happens when people confuse joy with danger, and then act accordingly. You don't chase revenge. You don't need to. You've got gravity on your side. Meanwhile, your cult spreads. Not because of force, because of fermentation. Wine is easy to love. Wine is easier to need. Cities begin building you temples that double as storage spaces. Vintners leave offerings before harvest. Dramatists dedicate their tragedies to you, then write comedies to make up for it. And slowly, your name becomes synonymous, not just with drinking, but with the very act of loosening. Loosening sorrow, loosening certainty, loosening what's been clenched too long. And then there's the theater. It starts small. Outdoor performances, chorus lines, crude masks. But over time, it evolves into something grand. Marble tiers, intricate costumes, entire cities pausing civic duties to attend your festivals. Tragedy, comedy, satire, all born from the same desire to feel something safely. Your symbol becomes the mask, one smiling, one weeping. Both true, both necessary. You are the god of both sides of the coin and of the spin between them. Actors invoke you before stepping on stage. Audiences murmur your name as the curtain rises. For a few hours, they are transformed, not into gods, but into people who remember they are human. And you? You sit at the edge of it all, not center stage, not above the crowd, just beside the fire exit, sipping wine, nodding along, delighted by how beautifully humans can pretend. And just when the world begins to forget that you are, in fact, a god, you remind them, sometimes subtly, a grapevine curling through a crack in the stone, sometimes less so, a man waking up with hooves where his feet used to be. You never punish without a lesson. You never reward without confusion. You are not a god of comfort. You are the god of what comfort costs. And everyone has their price. Eventually, even Olympus runs out of excuses. They can ignore your parties. They can frown at your masks and mutter about questionable associations. But you've got too many worshippers now. Too many cities pouring wine in your name. Too many temples humming with music they can't quite silence. And frankly, too many grapevines growing through temple steps where they absolutely weren't planted. So, one day, they cave. You're offered a seat. No big announcement. No celestial spotlight. Just a subtle rearranging of chairs until, mysteriously, there's one more at the table. Your name is etched into the golden plaques that line Olympus's long hall. It reads, Dionysus, twice born, bringer of madness, god of masks, chaos, joy. And that one time the satyrs tried to invent synchronized dancing and failed spectacularly. You arrive fashionably late, wearing something fabulous naturally. And while you take your seat, there's a faint hush. Because even here, among gods who throw lightning and wrestle sea serpents, you're still the weird one. The god of contradictions, of noise that heals, of grief that dances, Historians still argue whether your promotion was an act of true reverence or reluctant diplomacy. Some versions of myth claim Hestia, goddess of the hearth, gave up her seat for you, a quiet symbol of comfort stepping aside for chaos. Others say you took the seat by force, with so many mortals calling your name that Olympus had no choice but to answer back. You don't correct them. You just smile, sip, and pass the wine. But let's not pretend it's all toga brunches and nectar cocktails. Your life up here doesn't exactly settle down. You're still the patron of those who don't quite fit. And even on Olympus, that category is extensive. You befriend Hephaestus, the smith god who limps through the halls with calloused hands and too many brilliant ideas. You toast Hestia, even if she's rarely around. She keeps the fire warm, even when she's not at the table. You flirt with Hermes, obviously. You dance with Apollo, badly. You tease Ares. You ignore Athena's notes on your etiquette. You're not trying to belong. You're just trying to remind them all that gods, too, need to be shaken sometimes. It's not that you hate order. It's that you recognize its limits. So, you keep doing what you've always done, showing up exactly where you're not expected and making things slightly more vivid, more uncomfortable, more alive. Your role becomes one of divine disruption, like a thunderstorm at a garden party, like a theater curtain catching fire, but somehow improving the show. You don't destroy. You reroute. You take people exactly where they were going, just a stranger way. And you keep your other world too, the one outside Olympus. You visit your rites in secret. You walk barefoot among your followers, unrecognized except by the animals who still bow when you pass. You sing to the winepress. You whisper into the vines. You hum lullabies to the grapes before harvest. You are the only god who understands what it is to be between heaven and earth, between laughter and weeping, between celebration and collapse. You embody it. And so more people come to you. The broken, the joyful, the complicated, the ones who've been told they're too much, the ones who felt like not enough. They gather under your stars, lift their cups, and say your name. Not with reverence, but with relief. Because you never ask them to be perfect. You ask them to be true. And truth, like wine, is not always sweet. Your followers grow. Your image spreads. And with it, stories multiply. Some beautiful, some deeply strange. There's the tale of your journey to India, where you're said to have led a divine invasion. Elephants with gold-plated tusks, maenads riding tigers, satyrs teaching yoga badly. Historians still debate if this was literal, metaphorical, or just a fever dream recorded after too much fermented fig juice. Then there's your marriage. Yes, you get married. To Ariadne, formerly of the Theseus and the Labyrinth fame. Abandoned on Naxos, asleep on the beach, mascara possibly still smudged from betrayal. You find her. Or maybe she finds you. Either way, there's no grand proposal. Just a crown of stars, a shared goblet, and the quiet understanding that both of you have been left behind before, and aren't interested in doing it to each other. You lift her into the heavens, literally. Her wedding diadem becomes a constellation, Corona Borealis, a circle of light that reminds the night sky that sometimes, even in myths, something soft survives. It's one of your gentlest stories, one where no one turns into a tree or gets eaten by donkeys. And through it all, you keep changing. Some gods get codified, set in marble, trapped in definition. Not you. You remain elusive, a mystery, a mask that smiles and cries at the same time. Even now, modern scholars can't agree what you represent. Joy, madness, freedom, destruction, ecstasy, theater, alcohol, all of them? None? The answer, obviously, is yes. So here you are. Dionysus, god of the vine, the mask, the unhinged flute solo at 2 a.m., and the sacred art of not being easily explained. You're on Olympus now, officially. A divine name carved in golden stone. But you've never really lived anywhere fully. Not Olympus, not Earth, not the underworld. You float between. You show up in dreams, in parties that go a little too late, in vineyards where no one remembers planting. You linger in theater wings, backstage at the final rehearsal, or behind the eyes of someone who's just had one glass too many and is suddenly crying about a poem they haven't read in years. You're the god of too much, and the unexpected calm that sometimes follows it. But the world changes. The rites fade. The fires die down. The secret hillside gatherings grow rare. Rome arrives, with its togas and bureaucracy and fondness for conquering anything that moves. They rename you Bacchus and parade you through the streets. They try to tame you, to dress you up, to make you polite. They almost succeed. Your festivals are sanctioned now, scheduled, public, controlled, but not really. Because even in the streets of Rome, even in orderly processions, your spirit slips in like mist. A chariot turns sideways. A senator forgets decorum. Someone sings a song in a language they don't know. And somewhere far away, the vines lean in, listening. The Bacchanalia begin as ecstatic rites, wild, joyful, weird. And then Rome, predictably, panics. The Senate bans them, calls them dangerous, declares that too much joy is indistinguishable from rebellion, that chaos might be catching, which of course is the point. You don't cause collapse. You just make people notice when the walls start creaking. Historians still argue whether this is the beginning of your decline or your evolution, whether banning your rights snuffed your flame or just pushed it underground, deeper and stranger. But you've never needed a platform, or even permission. Your power doesn't live in temples. It lives in moments. A woman laughing alone in the kitchen. A song heard from a distance that makes someone cry without knowing why. A joke told too late at night that becomes a confession. A bottle uncorked on a Wednesday because surviving was a celebration. You don't need a cult to be remembered. You just need a heartbeat. And in that way, you never really go away. Even now, when no one quite prays to you anymore, your presence lingers. In the theater, in the wine, in the moment a crowd gasps. Not because the actor said something profound, but because they felt it together, like a single exhale. In carnivals, in music that makes strangers dance, in rituals we pretend are normal, toasting, cheering, wearing masks, telling stories to feel a little more like ourselves. In every awkward party that turns beautiful because someone finally let go. That's your temple now. And that's more than enough. You've outlived kings and empires, scripts and scrolls, temples and taboos. You've changed forms more times than anyone can count. You've been a child, a wanderer, a lion, a god. You've made wine from grief, theater from silence, and joy from places that swore they'd never laugh again. And maybe, just maybe, you were never the god of madness after all. Maybe you were always the god of truth, unfiltered and inconvenient, served in a goblet rimmed with laughter and regret. You were never about forgetting. You were always about remembering differently. And now, like a story told long past midnight, your myth settles into stillness. The satyrs are asleep. The tambourines rest quiet in the grass. The vine curls gently around your wrist, humming. The cup is empty, but the taste lingers. And as the stars blink above your borrowed hillside, you close your eyes, not to end the story, but to let it breathe. Because you, dear Dionysus, are the god of being too much. And somehow, just enough. The fire crackles softly now, just embers and memory. The hills that once rang with laughter have gone quiet, resting under a blanket of ivy and dew. The night is deep, velvet thick, and forgiving. There's no need to dance anymore. No songs left to sing. Just the hush of a story well told, and the gentle weight of knowing it stays with you. You feel the air shift, slower now, cooler. It carries the scent of crushed grapes and warm earth. There's a cup nearby, half full, catching starlight. You don't need to drink from it. You've already tasted what it offers. Joy, sorrow, the relief of letting go, the ache of remembering. Breathe in, breathe out. Let the image of the god fade, not in a burst of light, but like candle smoke curling into the dark. He isn't gone. He's just stepped off stage, leaving his mask behind. You can pick it up if you like, or just rest beside it.